So now I'm going to show you how to tie up the deep commercial bulk from my silverfish range of shotting patterns. So obviously you get these strips delivered like this and it tells you exactly what you need to do to tie them up. So as you can see on this, it has a bulk of number 8 shot and it has 3 number 10 droppers, an F1 maggot float, and I'm tying it on 013 power line, which is what I like to use in the winter. And this actual rig itself I use in depths above 5 foot, 5 to like 8 foot when I'm fishing over ground bait with maggots and casters, but fishing more on the bottom. If I was fishing strung out, I'd use a different pattern. And if I was fishing for bigger bream, I might use a different pattern, or if it was shallower, I might use a different pattern. So yeah, I'm going to show you how to tie it up now. So obviously it has a hole on the one end of the strip and a groove on the other, and the actual hole just goes over, you know, the end of the actual rig mate itself and the groove on the other. The hole fits on the end, obviously with the lowest bit of the ruler. It obviously goes to 0 to 70 on the rig mate itself. The hole just goes over 0 and the strip just goes over the pin where it says 70. So now we're all set up. Just going to move it close to myself, and yeah, we're ready to start making a rig. So I've got my 013 power line here. That's obviously what I'm going to tie my rig on, and I'm going to be using number 8s and number 10 shots to make my rig up. Now these are actually Balabini shot. These are nice hard shot, and when you place them on the line they don't move. I'm not a person who moves the shots very often. I like, when I put them on, I like them in position and they don't move around, they don't ping off either. And when I make my bulks, I can make them really, really nice and neat to aid presentation. So these are the actual shots I'm using. Then I've actually got some number 13 Preston Stotts, and these are just to dot the floats down to the absolute little pimple on the surface. It's really, really important. The bites in this winter time coming up can be really shy, so dotting your floats down with Stotts can be really, really important. So I've got them. I've got a loop tire. I always tie my loops with a loop tire on the end where my first shot before my hook length goes on, just because it makes a nice neat loop, really small loop, whereas if I made one by hand by myself, it might be a bit big, it might be small, you know, I find it hard to make a same size loop, so I always use a loop tire, and the knot itself is really, really strong. And then I've just got a black marker, just for when I actually tie my rigs, to get the shots exactly where I like them. Obviously it says exactly where to have them on this strip itself. I just like to mark the line with a little, it's a little like blob, and then it tells me exactly where to mark the shot, so I've got that for that. Shot pliers, Preston ones, just for putting the shots on, and never use your teeth because obviously it's going to damage your teeth, and you can never get them on to sit as nicely with your teeth. Never get the bulks as accurately. So pair of pliers, and then some scissors for cutting the line, and some 0.3. This is actually Guru silicone, nice and fine stuff. It sits really like nice on your floats, whereas some can be a bit cumbersome, a bit fat, and can ruin presentation. And this stuff just makes your float sit absolutely perfectly, nice and soft. So this is what I'm going to use. And to begin with, what I'm actually just going to do, oh sorry, I haven't mentioned the float. So the actual float itself says it on the actual strip, and that's what I'm going to use. So it's actually just an F1 maggot float, an all-round slim float, 1.5mm hollow bristle, so I can see it in winter light, because obviously it can be a bit hard sometimes. And this is just a carbon stem float, so perfect. So to start with, what I'm actually going to do is just cut 3 pieces of silicone. And what I do is I cut 2 pieces about 2-3mm long. So that's 1, 2, and then cut 1 more, and I cut 1 a little bit longer, just to overhang on the bottom of the float, because obviously if you root your rubber up and let the bottom of the float hit the actual line all the time, it can damage the line a little bit and it can break. So having that little bit of overhang stops that. And 3 pieces, you think, why didn't you just use 2? But I used 3, just keep that line nice and tight on the float, and if one rubber breaks, then you've got a spare one. So that's what I always do. So I'm actually now just going to put my 013 power line on the rig mate, and as you can actually see, I've just got the extension attached on here. Now the extension's really, really good, because it gives you that extra line of when you're making your rig up to manoeuvre it into the shotting tube to test your float. So I always make my rigs up with the extension for that reason. So I'm just going to move the metal collar, put the line on, push it in, put the metal collar over the top of him, and then do it up with the hand wheel, like that. Not too tight just yet, just because I want a bit of line to play with, so get to the end of the line, tighten him up a little bit for now. Perfect. So what I'm actually just going to do to start with is just cut the line nice and straight, just so I have a nice sharp edge to work with. It makes putting the float and then the silicone rubbers on really easy. So I get the eye of my float, slide him on like so, floats on the line, and now I just get my 3 pieces of silicone, the 2 smallest ones first. That's one. Slide him up, put the second one on. Slide him up too. And then get the third one and put him on. And then we will put them on the float. So that's the 3 pieces of silicone actually on the line and the float now. So obviously now we need to put the silicone on the float. So obviously the first one, this can be a bit fiddly, this can, so just take your time and get him on nicely. And then we'll just slide him up, and where I actually put him is about 1 inch from the bottom of the float. If you do it too tight to the body, the pressure on the actual eye and that rubber can sometimes leave you marking the bodies of your floats, or when you're hooking big fish and they're foul hooked and things and they're coming off, the eyes can ping out. So I just like to relieve that tension on the body a little bit in the eye and just move that rubber down just like 1 centimetre below the body of the float. So that's where the first one goes. Just gonna put the second one. Now just put that in the middle to keep that line nice and tight along the stem of the float. And then this third longer one, I just slide that about 3/4 on, because obviously as it's suggested, I want that overhang on the float to make sure that it's not damaging the line or anything, that it's just, everything's just nice and neat and got no damage on your float then, basically. On your rig, sorry. It's just a bit fiddly, this is, just working them up with my fingers. Like so, it's nearly there now. There he is. So now I've actually got my float on my line. 3 pieces of silicone. The eye, it's on the eye of the float as well, so my float's nice and neat in position now. It's not too tight on the line, but it's not too loose either, so it's absolutely perfect. Just slide him up the line a little bit, and what I'm actually going to do now is just create the loop where I'm going to attach the actual hook length to. So to do this, I'm just going to give myself a little bit more to play with. Move them up a little bit. And what I actually do now is obviously use my loop tire, and what I do is make a big loop, pinch them together like that, put my finger in the middle. So now I've got the 2 pieces of line nice and tensioned. Put the actual loop tie underneath that loop. Twist it twice to make a double loop. And then with this actual loop it's created, put it in the actual neck of the actual loop tie like so. Let it pull nice and tight, and then I wet him up. Makes a stronger knot apparently if you lube him up. So I do that. And I just slowly work him off that bottom bit of the loop tie so it all forms into the middle one. Like so. And then I just pull him nice and tight, and it just makes a nice, really strong little loop. Take the rest off the loop tie like so. Now I've just got a really nice little neat loop. I'll just trim him off. Perfect, nice and tight. And now I'm just going to give myself a bit more slack. Move this line down the actual rig mate itself and put it over the pin on the end of the rig mate, because now I'm ready to mark where my actual shots are going to go. So now I've put that line on that pin there, just put it over there. Tighten it up nice and straight. Tighten the actual line up now, because obviously having a tight line to actually put your shots on the line makes it really, really easy. I'll just move the float out of the way for now. So what I actually do now is get my black marker pen, mark where my actual shots are going to go, and this strip makes it so easy to do that, because obviously the shots are marked up exactly where to put them. So I always put one by the actual loop, so I just put a black mark there, and then where it says number 10 shot, I actually just get my marker pen, hold the actual line down with my finger, and just mark over where he's going to go. So it's left with a black mark so you can see it to put your next shot on. And then your next little mark for another dropper. Put that on. So obviously I've got my 3 droppers marked up now, and I'm just going to mark where my start of my bulk is. Like so. So now I've got 4 marks on the actual rig. So now I just follow obviously what it says. Obviously I'm using number 10 droppers today on these rigs. I love number 10s. I think it's an all-round size. Not too small. If you use really small droppers, sometimes you don't see the bites. but not too big either to just cumbersome go to the bottom. So I'm just going to get like my shots now and put them under the line, on the line like so, and put them on the line with your fingers, and just using your squeezy thing. What's it called? Pliers. Just putting the shots on the line now in position. That tight line makes it so easy. So I've got 2 number 10s on now. I'm not squeezing them too hard either. Just nice and gently putting them on. You know, not over squeeze them to make them really flat. Still want them nice and round. And like so. So I've got my 3 number 8 droppers on now. 3 number 10 droppers on, sorry. And now I'm just going to put my bulk on of number 8. So I'm using a 4x16 float today. So we'll have to do a bit of testing to see how many shots we're actually going to need in the bulk. But I'll put on 4 or 5 to start with. So I'm just going to put 1 on. And this is where my start of my bulk's going to be. Obviously my bulk's now going to go upwards from this. So what I do now is a little tip to get you really neat bulks. Get the actual slit of where you put your first shot on and line them all up. So when you get your next shot on, line the actual slits of the shots up. So when you put them on, like so, it's going to be a little bit fiddly this can, but it just means all your bulks are that much neater when you actually do them like so. It means it's not like a little caterpillar. It's like nice and neat, and I just think everything like this you can do to aid presentation must make a little bit of a difference. So that's 2. 3. 4, and they're all nice and neat now. All the slits are nicely in line. And now it just depends on the size of the actual F1 maggot float you're using. Obviously, if you're using a 4x12, you're not going to need as many. If you're using a 4x16 like here, you can use a few more. So I'm just going to put 5 on for now, like so. And we'll test it with these 5 because it might be about right, that. So what I actually do now to test it, this is where the extension comes in. Just take the actual pin off the end, move the float down, so obviously it's not going to hit the bottom of the shotting tube like so. And now you've got all this spare line to play with and put it into the shotting tube. So just going to dangle them in. You can see we're actually nearly there. It's actually on, it's just where the body meets the bristle. So that's really, really nice. But just to get it a little bit lower, I'm not going to put any more number 8s on or number 10s or anything. What I'm actually going to do is use those fine tuning number 13 stots. I only think it's going to need 1 more, so because what I like to do is set it to about half bristle, because sometimes when you go to lakes, if you put it any more shot on, so if you get it any more dotted down, sometimes when you get there it can be too dotted down, so I always like to set it to about half bristle. Just going to put one on number 13 on, and where I actually put these on is I put them above the bulk, so put it on above the bulk, and obviously the ease with these stots is you can just move them, so what I do is smooth them right down to actually above the bulk basically, so it's all nice and neat. That's one number 13 on. Doesn't sound like a lot, but that can just be enough, that can, to really dot it down. So we'll just get it all nicely dotted down now. Like so, you can see now it's set to about half bristle, so that's absolutely perfect. And ready to put on a winder, but I've not actually got a winder here. I've got one over here. Coming on with another rig on from earlier. So what I actually do is just loosen the actual line on the actual bit here. Just loosen it off so you can do wraps of the rig. Obviously, this rig's only going to be used to about 6-8 foot deep, so I know about 20 turns of this winder is at like a top kit in the next section of my pole, and that'll be more than deep enough for this rig. So I'm going to do 20 turns. That's 2, 3, 4, and what I actually do is put all the actual shots of the actual rig, I put it to one side and then put the float in the middle of the winder, so they're not all it's not all against each other, if that makes sense, on the winder. So I like to have it like that, and then I put all the other line, the other side of the float basically. 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 13, 14, 15. Like so, and I'm just going to get a little bit more, cut them off, and now I just make a big overhand loop to put on the end of the line, the actual connector when I start fishing. Because what I actually always do, to be fair, is end up cutting these rigs down a little bit. So just a big one for now, like so, just a double overhand loop, make it nice and big like that. just trimming the tag slightly. And keep wrapping him round, and then I just get the little pole anchor and put the loop over. So obviously that's one perfectly finished rig now. It's got another rig on there from earlier, but that's the perfect finished rig. And now if you want to make duplicates, that's why the rig strips are so good. The shots are all going to be identical in the same place, and you're ready to make as many as you want. So that's the F1 maggot floats, the bulk and 2 droppers, and yeah, perfect.